to the Future Living Lab podcast, a place where you can find conversations with your professors, industry professionals, and instructors. We are your hosts, I'm Breen.
And Matt. Today, we're talking about how to pull all-nighters in architecture with Dr. Jimmy Fraigne.
This topic is particularly really important and relevant to architecture students as we know what we look like to the world, not always pulling all-nighters and not having a good work-life balance. So I think it would be a quite interesting episode to listen to, and you would hear conversations about coffee and how to have a better sleep perhaps, and why to have a better sleep.
To discuss this, today with us is Dr. Jimmy Fraigne. He's an assistant professor and researcher at the University of Toronto, focusing on neural circuits and motor behaviors of sleep. As a neuroscientist and physiologist, he obtained his bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Poitiers in France and his PhD from Texas Tech University. He is known for having co-authored numerous articles in prestigious biology and medicine journals. And now, our conversation with Dr. Jimmy Fraigne. Dr. Jimmy Fraigne, thank you for being on the podcast today.
And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So today we're discussing sleep and sleep specifically as an architecture student. We're notorious for all-nighters and bad sleep habits, so we're coming to the expert for all the tips and tricks and information that we need to know.
Sounds great.
So I think we should start off. Can you explain in general why sleep is so important, and from an evolutionary perspective, why do we still have sleep?
So that's that's a big question.
Yeah.
Yes, obviously sleep is something that all species do. And so we all have evolved to have sleep. So, we think that means that there must be a reason why we evolved to have sleep. And it's still a debate in science. Like we actually don't, the truth is, to be truthful, is that we don't know why as a species we evolved to have sleep. But we know this sleep serves a lot of different functions, right? So we make the distinction between a primary function of any type of biological process and a secondary function. And we know a lot more about what are the secondary functions, why do we sleep? And some of those ideas are for like energy maintenance. It could be also for memory processing. That's probably one of the big ones. How your brain can actually process all of this information when you're awake. Something in sleep is actually happening to try to, help with the processing of that. It helps maybe with also neurodevelopment. It might help with removing toxins from the brain. I think that's one of the main function that we know of right now that has been discovered, is that part of the thing that happens in sleep is that your brain needs to remove a lot of toxins, and that happens during sleep. So it's a lot of different things that are happening, and that's why sleep is so important. That's why, as a species, we need to sleep.
Okay.
I think the main question that I would want to start off with is, at least in the modern society, we know, okay, a person perhaps needs 8 hours of sleep, and the sleeping time is at night. You wake up in the morning, you go to your work, and that's like your 24 hours clock. How, or I would say, is it same for everybody? And in terms of the time range and the amount of sleep that is needed by a person? Because sometimes for me, that 8 hours could be in the day, and then the night is different, in terms of the time range and that.
Yeah, so I feel actually there's a lot of flexibility of how we sleep. Mm-hmm. So on average, actually, it's about 7.2 hours for adult human beings. This is usually what is recommended, and that's what the average population is sleeping. Some people will sleep a bit less. Some people will sleep a bit more. It really depends on our biology, our genetics. So that's what you want to aim for. I mean, there's after different strategies, of course, because of society, sometimes we are pushed to not sleep enough because we have work to do, or exams to be preparing, or even, fun stuff that we want to do, and sleep gets in the way, right? So we push it, and usually during the week, majority of us are kind of reducing the amount of sleep that we have at night. But then we try to kind of compensate during the weekend. That's why most people, especially even since we are teenagers, people tend to not sleep that much. And then on weekend, you try to compensate. So there's a way to compensate. It's not probably the most optimal, but that's one of the way. Different cultures have different ways of doing that. Some cultures will, for example, do napping. It's not something that in North America it's done, but like if you look at Southern Europe, for example, in Spain or even in France, where I'm from, napping is totally normal and something that can be done to try to help compensate for the lack of sleep that you have at night. And it's mostly based on regulation of temperature, because if it's too hot, sometimes you are not going to be active. So you might as well try to take a nap during the day, and then like maybe stay a bit longer in the evening and do like see friends after work or do different things, right? So even culturally, we change how we sleep. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. But it is true that in our modern society, we try to like kind of crunch sleep as much as possible. And then there's the question of people needing to sleep at different times. So of course, as a species, what we call diurnal. So we are a species that is active when it's light out. Not all species do that, but that's what we do. And we sleep at night mostly. But we have like a lot of different chronotypes. So some people are more like morning persons and some people are night persons. So we usually make a difference of what we call them larks. Larks are usually morning people, and night owls are like evening people. And that's really based on your biology. Like this is something that you cannot change. And if the society was perfect, actually we will let people follow their biology, meaning that maybe you're more efficient to work at night and then get up like really late in the morning. That's more what your biology is doing. But because as a society, we like being regulated, people need to go to school or to work at like 9 in the morning. That actually changes for some people, and probably not the best idea, but that's what society is doing.
I feel accepted. I hope my mom is listening to this.
Yes.
I feel very, that people can work in the evening at night and be more productive at that.
Yes, exactly. That's totally normal. You actually there's a test that you can actually do to try to figure out if you're a morning type or an evening type person. You can find it online. Like if you look, I think the name of the test is the morningness eveningness questionnaire, MEQ, and that's something you can find online. And it will ask you questions to try to see what is the most optimal time for you and get an answer. These tests, and then these I think the Munich chronotype questionnaires that you can also do. Those are like different things that you can find online that will at least help you to try to answer like, am I really a morning person or an evening person? Most of us kind of know, but I think it's a good thing to try to do.
I did take that test actually. But not as formally. It came on my Instagram reels. You don't really need to sleep at 10 p.m. You can sleep at 2 a.m.
Yes.
and finish your sleep. So I wanted to prove to some people that this is normal and this is okay because that's how my body is functioning.
Yes.
However, the interesting thing you mentioned about the culture, it is not culturally or like my grandmother, for example, that's not how it worked for us back home. It used to be 4 a.m., the parent time, you wake up, then you take a nap in the afternoon.
To try to compensate.
Yeah. So that's how it used to be. So I'm glad that I actually didn't ever think about it. The sleep could differentiate in terms of like culture, like in the European culture.
Yeah, I mean, even in history, the way we slept used to be completely different. Before the invention of electricity and light, people used to have. So we are one of the rare species to have what we call monophasic sleep, meaning that we try to condensate all of our sleep in one period of time at night. But it didn't used to be that way. When we didn't have light available, people would actually go to bed maybe slightly earlier when it's night out, and then they will wake up in the middle of the night and do other stuff, and then go back to sleep and have a second night, right? And they used to do that. And then because of society, things change, and we have adapted and evolved in different ways. Because as a species, we still evolve too, right? So a lot of things are involved in the way we sleep, culturally, historically, just based on our environment.
I believe weather as well, which we can talk a little bit about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unwrap. There's so many of my questions already.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we talked about chronotype. So
Yes.
that's interesting. When I first learned about that, I feel like not many people know that in the first place. this just basic sleep knowledge that everyone should know. And yeah, that's super important that we can figure that out with the tests online. Is there anything else that we should keep in mind when we're trying to get proper sleep other than just the timing of the sleep? I'm thinking about the acronym QRT, which I've learned, what is it? Quality, regularity, and timing. So is that something that's common?
Yes, so that's quite common. So like that's one of the steps that if people have problem with their sleep, so they have insomnia, right? It's insomnia is probably the most widely known sleep issues that people have because it affects everybody. Actually, college students have probably the highest rate of insomniac people, just based on the amount of work that undergrad students have to do. So there's quite a problem that's systemic in majority of universities, right? It's a really high rate of insomnia. And the best one, there's like multiple ways where you can deal with insomnia, which is this problem of you can't fall asleep or you have problem with regulating your sleep. The best way to address this question is to be regular, right? So it's to me, and it goes to your chronotype. Yes, we have different chronotype. What's important is to always try to get to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. I think what's really detrimental is when you like move your schedule all the time, right? Like so, sometimes you go to bed at midnight, sometimes at 2, sometimes at 10 p.m., right? That doesn't work for you. It's not going to be optimal. Your body needs regularity because you have what we call a circadian clock, which is like a biology clock that we all have. They are all slightly different, but it lacks regularity. The clock is really entrained by the amount of light. It could be entrained by also how often you eat and when you eat. So there's a lot of things that can entrain it. But that's something that you have to respect, right? So and if you keep on switching when you are going to bed and when you are getting up, that's like makes it not as efficient. It makes that your sleep and your clock becomes not aligned, and that's usually when there's more problem that happens and difficulty falling asleep, difficulty with performing during the day. So it's probably one of the best thing that you can do is to try to be as regular as possible. And that's usually what's advised to people that have insomnia. The best treatment for insomnia is actually not drugs. Most people will think like, oh, you take drugs and sleeping pills and then you'll have great sleep. I think that's kind of like something that you can do to try to help if you're really desperate to sleep. But the best way to actually deal with insomnia is something called CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It's actually was something that was created in Canada in Laval by one of the professors there, and they've shown like by doing sleep studies that actually this is a more efficient way to try to treat insomnia, and it's only based on like trying to have a good sleep hygiene, trying to reflect on what's causing the insomnia and finding the cause of the insomnia. So it's more of like conversation and changing behavior than using a drug to help you sleep. So, and regularity is really important. The environment, your sleeping environment is extremely important for the quality of your sleep. A lot of things can affect it, but that's what you should be focusing on is try to be regular, to have good quality of sleep and to maximize that. And that will help like tremendously, especially if you don't have that many hours that you want to try to have the best sleep possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of a shift, I guess, in present day health, where we're trying to address the problems before going to the medicine, because a lot of people hear about these remedies where you can just buy them and it can serve to your solution, but there's so many other mechanisms that you can control your habits and the quality.
Yes, yeah, I think you should always start with that, and then after try to find other solution if you really have a problem, right? But usually we do the reverse, right? We find the drugs to try to solve a problem instead of trying to change our behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. Consistency is obviously really, really important in that until it's the weekend. And then we go back to it, and then it takes another, I don't know how many days to get back on
To
that.
readjust, yes.
To readjust, right?
It's
And
same
then
thing
it's
with
the weekend
vacation,
again.
or it's the same thing with like, yes, but consistency is better. I mean, I'm preaching that as a sleep scientist, but that's what I try to apply to in my life. Like I'm a morning person. This is my chronotype. So I know I will function fantastically. Like I'm up at 5 in the morning. This is not a problem for me. I'll get up. I will like read some of my emails, do some work. I'll do some work even before my students arrive in the lab. But then after, if you ask me to be functional at 10 p.m., then I'm not able to do anything, right? But I know that about me, and so my life is made around that type of schedule, and I try to be as regular as I can based on that.
Yeah. So on the topic of losing sleep on the weekend specifically, is there any way that we can compensate for that? If we lose the ability to have that regularity, can we get our sleep back afterwards?
Yeah, and so that's majority of us do that, right? Like sometime during the week, because of what you have to do, maybe you'll sleep 5 hours, or like it just happens, and eventually you are going to accumulate a sleep debt. You have no choice of that. It's sleep is a biological process that is what we call homeostatically regulated, the same way as your body temperature is regulated, the pH in your body, anything that's homeostatically regulated needs. If you push it in one direction, it's going to try to come back. So of course we accumulate this debt over time, and you have to find a time when you can catch up, and that's usually what we do on weekend. That's why you usually sleep for 10 hours to try to compensate. I think that's totally fine. I think like in the long run, that's a bit exhausting and probably not the most efficient way to go about it. But sometimes you need to adapt to whatever your situation is. So that's totally understandable. But yeah, that's just biology.
it's possible.
You will have to compensate one way or another.
Yeah.
You have no choice. So,
Okay.
and you should definitely do that, right? You should say like, oh, I'm sleeping too much. No, I think that's the right thing to do. Is that if you didn't sleep during the week, find a time where you can sleep more. And sometimes it's like, sleeping a bit more at night on weekends. Sometimes maybe even taking a nap because you're going to go out. That's totally fine. But I think you need to find the strategies, and there's nothing wrong with taking a nap. Of course, there's like different strategy about the naps. Usually the nap should not be too long, because especially for you're not used to napping, people tend to sleep a bit too long, and then they wake up from the nap a bit groggy. That's what we call sleep inertia, is that you're sleeping and it's really hard to wake up because you're kind of like so sleepy, and you want that sleep that you just sleep for too long, and you're stuck in it, right?
Yeah.
Really deep in your sleep. So usually you should try, as an advice, to take naps, but they don't need to be too long. Like I would say like 45 minutes is a good aim, maybe even less. Some people even need even less than that. They do power napping, which is a good way, and that's something even you can do during the week. You can train yourself to do power naps, and those power naps can be 5 minutes. You do not need to be laying down somewhere. It's just a question of closing your eyes and just putting you in this state of sleep, just really briefly, to try to be refreshed. And usually that's like really a fantastic way to wake up. But that requires a bit of training to just sleep for a short amount of time. But a lot of people that are creative used to do that. I mean, the most famous one is Dali. Dali used to, I think the story that he used to put a spoon between his fingers or his leg, I can't remember. And then basically he was waiting until he hears the sound of the spoon hitting the floor. Then Sao knew that he slept, and then he would wake up, right? This is the most famous
I remember that.
power napper that happens. But they are extremely powerful and useful.
There's the one on like they put like a spoon on the candle as well, and then when the candle.
And then you know that.
Yeah, and then I can't wake up with like 10 alarms. I don't know how people used to do that.
But that's why I think for power naps, usually you don't want to lay down. Like if I do a power nap, which has happened to me, I would just like be at my desk and just like close my eyes for like a minute or two, and I just let go, and then you just do that for like 5 minutes, and then you wake up, and then you're fully refreshed and ready to go. But that requires a bit of training to be able to do that.
100%. Power naps could be really.
Right? And it's a good strategy, especially when you are extremely sleep deprived, because you haven't been sleeping a lot. Like don't. My point is like don't take it negatively. I think that's a positive. You should harness the time when you can nap. Just do it as a compensation for when you're not sleeping. Right? You need to find a time when you're going to be able to catch up. So.
Then I think just before we move on to the other questions, I just wanted to make sure that like for all the audience like which are hearing us right now, we already have this kind of notion that, oh, sleep is important. However, for some people, I don't know if I know it's like a pleasure, like everybody has to sleep, everybody loves sleeping. Who doesn't love sleeping? But then the awareness about it, that things that it could lead to if you don't sleep, is also not a common knowledge. Because for me, for the longest time, I would also think that I get more time than other people if I don't sleep and I just finish this work, because I'm okay after 3 hours of sleep. What am I going to lose? So I would just want to ask that, is there like, what are the kind of big causes, like, or it could lead to like neurological disorders, and just so that our audience are aware to an extent, not to scare anyone, but also as common things that it could lead to.
Yeah, and it does affect your performance no matter
Yeah.
what. Not even in terms of like disease mechanism, but in terms of just performance. I think that's one of the study that I always mention to my students when I talk about sleep in my courses. It's a study that was done in human in college students. The two people that did the study is Bob Stigall at Harvard and Matt Walker at Berkeley, which is like, both of those are extremely famous sleep scientists, and Matt Walker has done a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos, and you can look him up. He's like really interesting sleep scientist. But they've done this study where they were looking in college students to see how their memory processing might be affected by sleep or not. And so they took a group of college students and they did like simple visual memory tasks. So it's just a memorization of image, and it's a test, and you need to try to remember which image you saw or you didn't see, right? It's a really simple task. And so they did that in a group of students. They train them, and then they test them every hours to see how they improve in that task. And then they had a group of students that were allowed to sleep for a few hours, and then tested them the same way. And what they saw is that if you even adjust for circadian rhythm, the people that didn't get any sleep didn't improve their performance on the same day whatsoever. But the people that were able to sleep actually improved, like by a factor of 2, their ability to have memory. So that's one of the first studies that they did. And something even more striking, they did another study where they did the same memory visual task. Then they had a group that was allowed to sleep that night and a group that was just one night of sleep deprivation. That's it. And then they tested them again the next day and up to 5 days after. The group that slept off improved over time. Every day it was able to improve their memory functioning. But the group that didn't have one night of sleep deprivation was not able to improve their performance for 3 days, right? So even one night of sleep deprivation has an impact on your ability to memorize and process new information up to 3 days after. And it's really huge. And it was really based, they made this nice correlation between like even the amount of deep sleep and the amount of dreaming sleep that you have. And it correlates really beautifully with the ability to memorize new information. Right, so that's usually one of the studies I always talk to my students to illustrate that something that's affecting you is affecting the way you learn. So no undergrad student should do an all-nighters technically if you want to be able to be functioning for a test, right? Like, and it depends on like the test that you do, but for like if you're studying for a test, you should not be doing an all-nighters. You should have some sleep to try to help with your memory processing. So that's just for, memory processing cognition. Long-term effects, which I think is really crucial. And we have more and more information that shows that actually the sleep that you've done when you were young. So, when we're young, we think like, we can do it. I can not sleep for 3 days and it's okay. I'm going to catch up and it's going to be fine. These studies in both animals and humans where they've shown that there's a correlation between lack of sleep in young age and the development of neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer. So they've clear indication of pathology, accumulation of those markers for Alzheimer's that happens different part of the brain. And that can happen like long time after. So even if you've done just like, I can tell you just for the animal studies they've done, they took mice and they basically restricted their sleep for 4 weeks. That's it. And then they looked at like months after if the mice will develop markers of Alzheimer's, and they sure did compared to the control group. So it's quite clear that there's a link And because, as I said, one of the functions of sleep is kind of getting rid of all those toxins that we accumulate during the day. If you don't have sleep, of course, you're going to have long-term, and that's just for Alzheimer's disease, but it's probably with cardiovascular disease. If you're
Yeah.
if you maintain like sleep restriction for a long time, even like metabolism, gaining weight. I think that's one of the problem that sometimes undergrad students have is like increase in body weights while they are studying, and part of it is because they are not getting enough sleep. Because a lot of our hormones, the way our biology works, needs sleep to be regulated, and if you don't have that, then it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Especially with the all-nighters, the permanent and long-term effects is stuff that we don't really know about.
Yes, and especially if you do that for weeks at a time, right? Like, I think if you were to do an all-nighters once in a while, that would be one thing. But if it's part of the way, as an architecture student, that's the way you work, and you are chronically sleep deprived for like weeks on end, that's becoming a problem. And so, you know, as a sleep scientist, I would not advise to do that. And I would, that's why I'm just saying, try to find compensation. Try to find a time when you can sleep, because you can't. Even if you do all-nighters, you don't sleep at night, and I know you have projects to do. I'm sure there's time during the day where you are not functioning properly, right? So maybe take that as like, oh, just going to get some sleep then, and then I'll be refreshed, and then I can work again. Maybe that's a strategy you can try to apply if you don't have a choice. But the best situation would be try to be regular, try to have as much sleep as possible. Your work will be more efficient, and even in terms of creativity, I think it's going to be better if you have the right amount of sleep.
I mean, since we talked about architecture, and we were talking about this before we started recording as well, like as an institution, as a university, how do we like tell the students that it's fine, or how we even tell the professors for that matter that what are your expectations are too high, in terms of what are you expecting, the amount of details you're expecting from an architecture student to, because obviously every student is different. Like some of them are really productive and you can do so much in a short amount of time, and some of them, to match that, needs
to forgo sleep, right?
Yeah.
It's tricky. I don't know if I have a solution for that.
Yeah.
I think that's why, being part of the conversation, right? Like having a conversation, a genuine conversation with like professors in your department. They do care for their students. That's 100% for sure. But they might not be aware of that, right? So having conversation about, okay, well, we know, and that's a big issue for the university, like mental health is a big issue for the university. Lack of sleep is going to affect mental health, right? So I think as the university in general, I think promoting good habits, promoting what's going to be good for the student is important. But that starts with conversation, right? That if you want to change any culture, you might want to make the environment as healthy as possible. This starts with conversation that can come from students, sometimes coming from professors, but sometimes they are not fully aware of like this is the struggle, right? And so having this type of conversation, even like in a podcast, I think that's really helpful.
Our architecture professors, I just want to say to our students in architecture that they are super understanding. Because it's like a generational trauma. They were there, they suffered that. It's just a matter of you telling them your situation and saying like, oh, I could not do it, I didn't sleep. So
and they can find ways to accommodate. And also sometimes professors, even if we tell students like, I'm telling you, this is fine. Like if you have a problem, come talk to me. Let's have a conversation. I think students get afraid of doing this, or like stress about like, well, but others people are not doing that. But if nobody is talking, right, how are we going to go anywhere?
Right.
So it has to start somewhere. And maybe it starts, something like that, where you have communication about the advantage of sleep, finding strategies, how we can adjust even the way we test people or evaluate people or like, the timeline of projects. Maybe this is the way that can be adapted, but that can only start if there's a conversation.
I like how you said advantage of sleeping, where like, where we focused before on all the, like, if you don't do this, this will happen.
Yes.
The advantage, I think, be more productive, maybe less procrastination because your body has energy to do things.
Exactly,
right?
because
You regulate
sometimes
stuff.
we are tired all the time, right? If you're sleep deprived, you are tired all the time. How are you going to find the energy to be able to start something, right? And not have to wait until the last minute. But if you are more regular, right, then you'll be able to, okay, I can control my schedule better. Maybe I can try to do some stuff in advance, even if it's little things, right? Like, it's what I said to all my grad students. Sometimes we just need to do one step at a time. And maybe that's the right strategy to get to the finish line. But we're not aware of that, and we just like are suffering from the consequences, and then everything gets mismatched. So regularity is good. Trying to find solution is good. And I think I think especially for architecture students, I think creativity is probably one of the main things that you guys have to come up with. You have to imagine something new or something different. Creativity comes from sleep as well. Like there's like a ton of study that have shown that, especially one of your so in sleep, especially in mammals, we have two different types of sleep. We have kind of a deep sleep, and we have our dreaming state. This is called REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. This is usually where you have the most intense dream, and there's a lot of study that shows the link between the amount of REM sleep and the ability to be creative and problem solvers. That's probably one of the function of that sleep, is to be able to do that. If you forego that specific type of sleep, then you're like basically disturbing your ability to be creative. And I think it's this ton of even recollection of people that are extremely creative, where the idea came in their sleep, and from music to literature, right? I think one of the most famous one is Paul McCartney came up with some of his song while he was dreaming, right? So creativity is linked with that, and is scientific evidence for sure that that's the case. But if you forgo that, that's the problem. And that's one of the problem with shortening your night of sleep is not, you don't sleep the same amount of those two different type of sleep at the same time in your sleep. It's not equal. Usually you start with the deeper sleep. This is the first part of your night where you're going to have the deeper sleep. That's really restorative. It does a lot of different things. And then towards the end of the night, so more like the early morning, this is when you are going to have more of that dreaming state. Yeah. So now let's say you only sleep 3 hours a night, maybe you're cutting part of that sleep that you would need to be creative, right? So it's trying to finding the right balance to make sure that you have some REM sleep that happens to be able to be creative.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. Just because we're on the topic of dreams, I have a question for myself. Now that the whole world will listen to my sleep and my dream. So you said the first part is deep sleep.
Yes.
Usually when, this is literally like I'm talking to a doctor about my issue. I love this. So, some people can make their own dreams. While they're in the sleep, they know they're dreaming.
Lucid dreaming, yes.
Yeah, they are. So
they're conscious of the fact that they are dreaming.
Exactly, they're conscious of their.
Sometimes some of these people have the ability to change the content.
Yes.
The context, the content, whatever is happening. Yes.
Yes. And then the other time is the deep sleep, where when you wake up, thank God it was like, you were sleeping. Because
yes.
You thought that was the reality.
Yes.
For me, I always like making up my dream in terms of how I want it, right? And that made me think that, was it not a deep sleep? Was because I was so attached to the reality, and because of the noises around me, I was making up things, right? So does your dream also like defines that you can take dream as a context or as a parameter to judge how was your sleep?
I don't think you could judge based on when you wake up, like your relationship with the dream content. Did you have like healthy, good amount of sleep or not? That's completely different, because we're talking about two different types of sleep.
Yeah.
And both of them are important, right? You need the deep sleep for a lot of different physiologic mechanisms that are extremely important, from cardiovascular issues to different hormones that are released at that time. So, and even the detoxification of your brain is happening in that deep sleep, right? So both of those things are important. So I don't know if you could just like, I was able to do that, then probably had like a good quality sleep. So it would be impossible to tell that. Right. Quality of sleep it's a tricky thing to evaluate. It really depends on a lot of different parameters. Usually we can see that in the sleep lab if we record your brain activity, and we can get a sense of what quality of sleep is. But like on a day-to-day, that's really quite difficult to do so fast.
And scary. Like imagine they can look at your brain and the kind of dreams and
No,
everything.
we can't see the content. At least no, but at least for the moment. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. I mean, that's what one of the project of Elon Musk is like DeepMind, where they want to try to be able to control robotics or things with our mind. But to me, if you reverse engineer that, and you could try to infer what's happening in the content of dreams. I mean, we could get there eventually, not right now, but I think we could get there. If we want to do that or not, that's a different question.
100%.
Okay, before we dive in more on the all-nighters,
Yes.
I'm looking at the time. I want to ask about just the circadian rhythm.
Yes.
If you have any knowledge of what times during the day can we prioritize maybe different tasks, maybe sometimes during the day are better for deep thought, sometimes better for studying, and sometimes we can
So I can tell you in general, right? Because of course I've talked about chronotype. It would depend on your chronotype when you are efficient, right? So it's really, that's why trying to define when is the optimal time for you is really depending on that. But on average, I would say like on average, there's two times that are extremely the most efficient for cognition and being able to process information. This is late morning and late afternoon. So late morning would be like 10 a.m. till noon. This is where your brain is the most efficient to be able to like process information or think deeply about a topic. And the other time is like more later afternoon, like after 3 p.m. Usually we have a gap in between like lunchtime and like this mid-afternoon. We are not the most efficient in general, right? It's usually after lunch. This is like you're getting a bit tired from the day. So not the most efficient. So maybe if it was me, I would try to work quite hard in the morning, and then take a break, do something else like in the beginning of the afternoon, and then you can go back to it like in the afternoon, early evening, and that's where you probably will be the most efficient, just based on what we know from the science. Once again, really depending on your chronotype. Of course, if you don't get up until like 10 or 11, then everything is shifted.
Yeah.
And the reverse for me, I'm a morning person. I'm up at 5. I'm extremely efficient at 7 a.m. Like I can do a lot of different things. And usually it's quiet because nobody's up at that time, so I can do a lot of things. So it just really depends on your chronotype. But those are like, usually you have like 2 peak of that's optimal for your cognition is this late morning and kind of late afternoon.
Okay. And I think I don't know, it was one of the architecture professors in my first year when they were explaining that, depending on whatever your type is, and the first time when you wake up, it's better to do the creative tasks then, and then later in the day, more like tedious, like replying to the email kind of tasks.
Yeah.
So I think as architecture and like artists, like they do have like their own, obviously your own timings, but that's how most of them maybe do their scheduling.
Yeah, and it's probably like you probably feel that naturally because you know, as we are awake, we have an accumulation of sleepiness, right? That's a true statement. There's a biological process in our brain that accumulates sleepiness. This is adenosine. This is this accumulation of adenosine in your brain that is the marker of sleepiness. One of the reasons why coffee works, for example, is because coffee is actually binding to those adenosine receptors. So that's why you don't feel as sleepy when you drink coffee. There's a biological reason why we are all addicted to coffee is because of that. But it's just a natural like progression. That's why, yes, as time goes on, maybe in the afternoon you are not as efficient. But it's usually this dip, like right. So you have periods where you won't be as efficient. Maybe like late afternoon, early evening, that's where you're going to be more efficient. I do that even for when I write, for example. I know that from myself. I will write in the morning, and I know in early afternoon, it's like I'm useless. Like I can try as much as I can. I'm not going to produce something that's meaningful. So I prefer to like take a break and, you know, go chat with my students, do other tasks like responding to emails or preparing, you know, videos or things like that. That is important for my lectures. But I won't be writing. I would wait until like, you know, 3 or 4, and then I become more efficient, and then I will write until like, you know, maybe 6 or 7 p.m. and then I'm good. Sometimes it's just trying to find the right optimal times to do the task.
Right.
More than trying to force yourself to do the task,
Yeah.
right? Because then you become not efficient. You're becoming discouraged about why am I not to be able to do that? Well, I think you just need to listen to your body and then tell yourself, oh, that's okay. If during that time, I'm not being productive, I'm going to do something else. And then you can go back to it because you'll have more mental capacity to do it. Right. So just a question of balance, right? Sometimes we just have to listen to our body, and the body is really telling us like what's optimal or not.
Yeah, there's a lot of natural ways that we gotta understand and some these things. I'd like to ask about caffeine. What time of day should we take caffeine? If we do, are there any other supplements
Well,
that would help us in the circadian rhythm?
so I don't know too much about supplement. I know some supplements about sleep that will be efficient. Like that's quite clear. Like for example, magnesium is a quite well known supplement that people are taking. It depends on what type of magnesium, but magnesium will help with your sleep. There's evidence for that. Mostly because it helps you with the inhibitory neurotransmitter pathways in your brain. So it helps with relaxation of muscle, but it also helps with you sleeping properly. So magnesium, great for sleeping. Caffeine, yes, it helps with like your feeling of sleepiness. It's not going to take away your sleep debt. That's why people drink a lot of coffee, trying to like feel less sleepy, but that doesn't mean it's making you more efficient somehow.
Yeah.
There's like, especially there's like and I can't remember the dose, but there's a limit of the amount of caffeine that you need in the day. After that, it won't do anything more. Actually, it will have more effect on your like GI system and your cardiovascular system. That's why people feel jittery, and it's not really efficient. So it's like helping with this appearance of like you need coffee, but you know.
So there is a limit to caffeine.
Yeah, there's a limit. I can't like on top of my head. I can't remember exactly what's the dosage, but like I'm talking about like 1 to 2 cups a day is max. Like I personally just like drink 1 coffee a day. That's it. I do it in the afternoon, usually when I have my dip in the afternoon. I don't drink coffee in the morning because I used to drink a lot more. Like most of everybody, I love the taste of coffee. I think it tastes delicious. But I was starting to feel that I was feeling jittery, and my body was not liking the amount of caffeine I was getting. And so I had to stop for a while. It was not great because usually when you stop caffeine, you have huge headaches. That's really the worst part of that. But that goes away. And then you can train yourself to not really need caffeine, and definitely not need caffeine when you just wake up, because it only helps with this feeling of sleepiness. When you wake up, if you have a full night of sleep, you should not feel sleepy. That's just not normal. If you feel sleepy when you wake up after a full night of sleep, there's a problem somewhere, right? There's an indication that this problem is your sleep. So you don't need that. So that's why I usually only drink 1 cup, usually in the afternoon, unless I really want the taste of coffee more than anything. But you don't really need more than that.
So I guess the timing as well to take the coffee would be not exactly when you wake up.
No.
Maybe not too late in the evening as well.
Not too late in the evening. It will stay in your system for many hours. Usually people, let's say a normal person that will go to bed at like 10:30, 11, like usually they say after 6, probably not a good idea. If you're sensitive to caffeine, some people are not as sensitive, so it's fine. But if you're sensitive to caffeine and you have problem falling asleep late, maybe forgo the caffeine after 6 p.m. Not really useful. So it just depends on how your biology works, right? You just have to adapt to that.
The coffee conversation always like it takes me back to the initial conversation we were having about the culture part and the weather. So why is it's so normalized in certain places, specifically the Gulf region, you would say the weather at the nighttime is pretty cold or better than the daytime, because in the day it's really sunny and you practically cannot enjoy your time outside because it's so sunny, and then you wait for the evening, and then everybody starts their evening coffee, and then it goes up until like 10, 11, but then they go back and sleep. It's fine, just because how used to they are.
It's like a part of their culture.
Yeah.
Also, it's like, I mean, I don't know as much about, that specific culture. It's possible also that, as a culture, there's sleep deprivation there. And so, even if you have coffee late at night, you are so sleepy that you are going to fall asleep no matter what, right? Because your body is like, wow, we need to shut down. You have no choice in that, right? So my comment on coffee is just really depending on who you are. If you have problem falling asleep when you want to fall asleep, because that's the main idea, is like, when do you want to fall asleep? But in terms of when caffeine is useful, in terms of science, I think this, early afternoon, probably the best time. Sometimes actually I would even say if you want to have the best situation for your coffee is you take your coffee and then you have like a small nap, and then you will feel first refreshed from the nap, and you have the caffeine that's going to hit up at the same time. That's going to really help with being efficient.
Yeah, that helps me a lot. I do that quite often. It's just
Yeah.
it's just so normal. Like, yeah. There's a question from the team. I think there were a few questions because we were asking about this conversation. So we're going to have this.
Yeah.
Tell us your questions. And one of the questions, which was almost, it's like a scary concept, is sleep paralysis.
Yes.
And,
which is terrifying.
Which is terrifying.
It doesn't happen. So it can happen to almost everyone, really rare. It happens more in some people that... in some specific situation, people that have a disorder called narcolepsy, they would have more likely to have sleep paralysis. And I'm going to tell you in a second what sleep paralysis is like. But also, if you are like, sometimes if you are sleep deprived chronically for a long period of time, you could have increased the probability of having sleep paralysis. So the notion of sleep paralysis is when you wake up, what happens is that your brain is awake, but your body is still paralyzed. Because the dreaming sleep that I was mentioning before, one of the characteristic of this sleep is you're dreaming, your brain is quite active, but your body is paralyzed, so you don't act out your dream. That's kind of the idea. Well, in sleep paralysis, what happens is that this paralysis is still present when you wake up. It's actually quite terrifying because you're awake, you're aware of the environment, that you're in your bedroom or wherever you are, that you're awake, but you have no control of your body. So it's quite terrifying. And that's usually people that have narcolepsy. That's one of the symptoms that this is the most terrifying, is not having control of your body when you wake up, because it's extremely stressful. Usually with sleep paralysis, what's associated with it is hallucination. So people often would have what we call hypnagogic hallucination, where they will see like dark figures coming at them, or like in the corner of the room, or like even a monster sometime on their chest. Like while they are paralyzed, right? And it's quite terrifying, right? This association of you can't move your body and you have this hallucination that happens. It does not last long usually, and you will be able to regain the control of your movement, but it is something that's terrifying.
Right.
The hallucination is probably, at least I would think that it's due to the fact that your brain is trying to make sense of the fact that you're paralyzed. You need to find an explanation why you are feeling this paralysis, and it might be because of stress of somebody is attacking you or something is on top of you. And that's true throughout the cultures. A lot of different cultures have the same representation in art, where they would have a sleeping person with a monster on their chest. There's a famous painting that's like that you have, I'm sure a lot of you have seen. But it's true also in culture in Japan, in Africa, that there's this notion, because sleep paralysis is something that happens.
Yeah.
But it is quite terrifying, and not something pleasant. I think it happened to me maybe once in my life, and it was not pleasant whatsoever. I do not recommend it. It can happen, but
Wow. That's like, as a like what sleep educator, I think there was a few questions related to you personally. I think
I have one more question before we move on. Just
Okay.
at the time, we can squeeze it in. Can squeeze it in.
Yeah.
I want to know about all-nighters specifically. I want to know how, if it happens, because I'm sure it
does happen. There's
happen.
Yes, unfortunately, I would agree with you.
Yeah, and people are trying to get through their work as fast as possible. They're overwhelmed, but they have to stay awake. How can we set up our environment and our situation, maybe with food, lighting?
So lighting is going to be important. Of course, you want to have bright lights. Like the more lights you have, it's going to help you stay awake. That's for sure. Not really pleasant. Like this type of light will work. Usually blue light is really what signals our brain that we need to be awake and pay attention. So, and this type of white light is generally blue light that you'll be able to see. In terms of like environment,
Maybe like the temperature.
like temperature. So usually, if you reverse engineer when it's the best thing for sleep, we know that sleeping in cold environment is what you want to do. So actually, it's something that I tell all of my students. Your body, when you fall asleep, usually your body temperature is going to decrease. This is a normal physiologic mechanism. You want to try to do everything you can to have this type of mechanism of your body temperature decreasing. So sleeping in a cold environment is the best. Usually, I would say around like 16, 17 degrees, 18 degrees, quite cold, colder than what most people think. I think it's important to have, you can sleep with a cover on, but having the environment cold, you can thermoregulate more easily and lose more of your temperature, especially if you have your arms outside of the bed. That's really helpful. So if you reverse engineer that, I guess like slightly higher temperature is going to help stay awake. And
What about
and for food, I actually don't know. Of course, like if you stay awake, you are going to crave food and wanting to eat. There's no doubt about that. Because your body is needing energy, right? Usually the problem is you're going to make bad choice in the type of food you are going to have. You're going to order like, takeouts, eat burgers and snacks on chips and cookies. Probably not the best thing, especially if you have a spike of insulin, probably not going to help you so much. So at least if I were you, you're going to eat, maybe try to find something that's more of a meal that's going to sustain you for longer hours. Maybe, try to have more proteins and some more complex carbohydrates that are going to help you like sustain your energy for a longer period of time so you can still sleep and not have as much of those spikes of insulin that are not great for you. So
okay, perfect. That's gonna help me.
Yeah, I think it's like you want to try to, if you're not being healthy by not sleeping, at least try to be healthy in other ways and make the right choice. But I know it's really difficult. Like usually your brain is going to tell you like, I'm craving a bag of chips and I'm going to eat the whole thing so I can stay awake. But it's probably not the most optimal way of doing that.
But the best sleep is like the food coma. You have like this warm, like
Well, yeah, but
rice.
if your goal is to stay awake, then that's fine.
You eat so much, then you feel so sleepy,
Yes.
and then you sleep for a really, really long time.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of sleep. I eat a lot of that. I sleep.
Say.
Just wanted to make sure. Did you guys have any questions?
Mine was when you sleep less hours and you feel more awake than when you sleep longer hours.
So if you say it again, if you sleep less hours, you feel more
alert rather than when you
I think so. I think that sometimes there's this subjectivity of you feeling like, oh, I didn't sleep as many hours, and I feel like, oh, I can do that, right? And then I have the energy. Most of the time, it's because of the adrenaline. You have convinced yourself that you're on adrenaline, and you have like things to finish. So this motivation of you trying to stay awake and feeling like I feel great because you have this adrenaline, and it's not real. It's really subjective. Your brain is really telling you like, well, yeah, it's totally normal. You can do it, right? It's because you have this endorphin, this adrenaline, that you can do anything. Even scientifically, people have tried to stay awake for a long period of time. I think the world record is 18 days, which is crazy. Do not recommend that. I think the most famous one was not 18 days. It was like in the 60s. There was a high school student that decided to do sleep deprivation. He stayed awake for 11 days. He was actually followed by a famous sleep scientist, Bill Dement, that actually followed through this sleep deprivation experiments that he was trying to do. That he was trying to do that for a scientific, like a high school science project. 11 days is a long time. You can do it through motivation activities. He was able to do that. Of course, there was a lot of detrimental things that happens to him. He has like problem with memory, cognition, a lot of hallucination. Mood was one of the problems. Like he became extremely moody, and so extremely sensitive because he had no way of processing his emotions. So that's what happened. And he was able to do that for 11 days, and eventually he had to compensate his sleep for like 14 hours straight. And I think it took him like more than 10 weeks to go back to a regular sleeping schedule. And unfortunately, the problem is that individual is also he had long-term effects. So even like he wrote a book, if I remember, where he said like even in the adult life, like he had always problem with insomnia, and probably the root cause was probably due to this experiment of sleep deprivation. So yes, through motivation, you can stay awake, you can feel great, and you can even overestimate your ability. But it's kind of like really subjective, and in terms of like objectively are you going to be that efficient? Well, probably not.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, another question that I had relating to when we're talking about coffee, if it is most optimal to probably have it in the afternoon, then like, how come there are a lot of people who wake up and they're like, oh, I cannot function unless it
It's
happens?
called addiction. I think one of, you know, as human beings, we are addicted to a lot of different things. So we sometimes crave things, and coffee is one of them. And it's probably like the biggest drug in the world because everybody is addicted to this caffeine. It's because you have trained yourself to need it, and so when you wake up, it's like, oh, I'm not going to be awake until I have my coffee. But that's just completely subjective. Just you've trained your dopamine system to like, yes, the first sip of coffee. And usually you get the effect of the coffee just with the first sip. Like caffeine is not in your system. You're just getting the reinforcement from like, I know I'm going to drink coffee and I feel better already and like super awake. Like caffeine is going to take some time to get in your bloodstream. So that's not the reality, right? And it's just based on addiction. So you can, like any addiction, you can, you can have withdrawal from addiction. That's why usually when you stop coffee right away, big headaches, it's not really pleasant, but it just takes like a week or two, and you can, control that. As I said, I start myself, I don't drink coffee in the morning. I have like herbal tea. I drink mint tea just because I like hot water. That's the way I was able to find a compensation to not drink coffee, but so you can train yourself.
Well, through the medium of this podcast, I feel like we should make this appeal that I think architecture students should be studied by a group of scientists and their habits and everything.
That's very true because
Right?
to be honest, as a biologist, it's hard for me to know what is the habits of other students and what they have to do. And yes, for sure, maybe that's the study that we should do is look at the effect of sleep deprivation on architecture students and also performances, right? Like
Yeah.
if we want to, because I'm sure, because we know that from general population that cognition is impaired, right? I'm sure, if you find a better balance in your sleep habits and like sleep hygiene, maybe you're going to be more productive. You need to think about sleep as not as something that's preventing you from doing the work. Maybe something that's going to be your superpower that's going to help you do a better work. And don't you want to do better work than just finish it?
Agreed.
That will lead to a better work-life balance for architects and
Yeah.
students as well.
And I think that's the perfect way to close out the episode.
Thank you so much. It was great. It was such a good conversation,
Yeah.
and I wanted to keep talking.
There's so much interest.
Yeah.
But that's it. So that
Okay, thank you.
did perfectly.
Thank you.
Be here with us.
If anybody has like seed question, they feel free to email me. So I'm sure you guys can with my email, the sugar and so I'm always happy to answer questions if people want to talk more. Even if with your professors, right? If some of them are listening to the podcast and they want to have a conversation with the student, but healthy habits, and even taking your first year and they want to have a chat about that, like I'm happy to have this conversation. Like, feel free to email me. I'm happy to do that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's all for this episode of How to Pull All-Nighters as an Architecture Student with Dr. Jimmy Fraigne. We were your hosts, Matt.
And I'm Bree. Thank you to our amazing team, Nathania, Janice, Alejandra, Kushi, and Kyla. You can always find us on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Thank you.